Hello, and welcome to our webinar on what we're calling an integrated managed service provider, or an IMSP. Just a note, in this presentation we'll deal with managed services for the Power I and IBM I for the most part, or at least the examples that we'll be using will be around those platforms, but the concepts will ring true for any platform. The types of situations that we'll be outlining, I'm sure, won't be any different as you might see on any other infrastructure that you might be working with. But before we get started, I just want to mention a few housekeeping things. This presentation, first of all, will last about between 40 and 45 minutes, and then we'll have some time at the end for some questions and answers. We'll be muting all of you for the presentation to make sure that we do not have any feedback or noise issues. And if you have any questions, please enter those in the chat window to the right of your screen. You can see that up on the screen right now. We'll be monitoring for those questions during the presentation, and we'll try to incorporate answers as we go along. However, if we do not get to the questions that you have during the presentation, we'll certainly do so at the end and cover those. So first, let me start by introducing myself. I'm Larry Doobie. I've been involved in managing application support and managed services for the Power I and IBM I for just under 30 years now. I started in the software world developing software for process manufacturers and eventually moved up to running global application support organizations. I've since started my own company with my partners Terry Tadson and Ed Kelly, and now offer a complete solution from essentially the plug in the wall to the end user, handling application and infrastructure support for our clients. And it's through that journey that we've made from application support to managed services that we discovered the need for what we're calling an integrated managed service provider, or IMSP, like I mentioned before. But we'll get to that in a minute. Joining me today also is Dave Kravitz.
Yes, and good morning, Larry, and good morning to everyone on the call today. Welcome. Just to give you an idea of where I'm coming from, I am an APIC certified chem engineer with an MBA. I began my career working in manufacturing management with Fortune 100 organizations, Owens Corning, Baxter Healthcare, and the like. I developed new manufacturing processes and systems. I've managed operations departments, and I really began a passion for working with manufacturing organizations. And that continued over the next 30 years as I worked in various enterprise business software systems. I've been a senior application consultant where I just love taking factory tours and showing organizations how the software fit those organizations. I've been in marketing product management as an ERP product manager and the like. And more recently, I've been a sales executive with PSGI, where I really do enjoy working with organizations and with the software that they employ.
So as you can see, Dave and I come from different backgrounds. I'm coming from the managed services, application support, and technical background for the most part. Dave is bringing his business knowledge and his industry skills to the table. And really that's kind of a good mix of what we're trying to accomplish in this presentation. We want to show you what a managed service provider should bring to the table from a business perspective, and Dave can bring that knowledge to our presentation here. So our team is in skill set similar to what we think an MSP should bring to the table. Let's start with just the agenda. We'll start by going over some definitions, and we'll move through various topics that you would naturally be concerned about as you look to an MSP for services. For example, does your MSP have the proper expertise? Do they have the breadth of services that you might need for your business? What kind of positive impact can they have on your business? Sometimes we think about an MSP or a service that resembles support of any kind really as a necessary evil sometimes. But if it's done properly and you have access to the correct expertise combined with the right services, those things should bring a pretty positive impact to your business, and that's what we really want to take a look at. Accepting that the basic needs from your MSP may not be enough, we hope that this presentation will make you ask some questions a little bit differently than you did in the past. So that's our goal here, is to really kind of make you ask different questions and look at the MSP's process slightly differently. So first, let me start by saying we're not trying to scrutinize the technical skills and processes that a good MSP should offer. I would say that any reputable MSP would certainly have the the technical skills needed, and they most certainly would have the processes in place to govern your environment, not to mention they should be investing in the proper infrastructure and tools they need to support you. So we're starting this presentation with the assumption that an MSP can without fail take care of your infrastructure. So they're good at the technology pieces. They have that, they have their act together from that perspective. What we do want to mention, though, is that the traditional view that we're talking about, of an MSP providing those services, well, that just may not be quite enough. So let's think about it this way for a second. Try to imagine a piece of information, and where it has to go in order for an order from one of your customers, for one of your customers to enter an order, perhaps online, and then follow that order all the way to fulfillment. And then when you consider what it takes to get that product potentially manufactured and into a warehouse, you have another complex set of transactions that needs to take place. And if you imagine your supply chain, I'm guessing that your environment, in total, adds even more complexity to that. So even in the most streamlined environments, there are always multiple systems to work through, especially if you're communicating electronically with your supply chain. And then on top of all of that, if you add in the financial transactions that are necessary to run your business, well, it's complex. You get the picture. And that picture is pretty complex. This is just a example of one company's data migration through the processes. The IT landscape for you to deliver a product to your customers can be complicated. Like I said, even in the most streamlined environments with fewer applications, there's still some of this going on, actually quite a bit of it. And that complexity is in almost all organizations. And the number one factor why I believe the concept of an IMSP is quite necessary is because of this complexity. It's the understanding of these items and how they work together.
Yeah, Larry, I mean, that is a very complex diagram we're showing here. And I think, I just want to emphasize that our point here is to emphasize there's a lot of moving pieces in their organization. Some are technology-based, some are business-based, all are important to the organization, but even more important are the interrelationships between those.
So, our question for this presentation is can a traditional MSP really understand how the infrastructure supports the business functions that you need to have operational every day? Now, you may ask yourself, is that really necessary for your MSP to know anything about your business, or should they just be technology and platform network experts ensuring the technical stability of your organization? Well, an MSP certainly needs to do that, but we contend that we contend they can do a little bit more with just a little tweak in the focus and provide much more significant benefit to the business by doing that. I guess let's start with a definition that might help propel our discussion forward. Managed services is the proactive management of an IT asset or object by a third party, typically known as an MSP, on behalf of a customer. The operative distinction that sets apart an MSP is the proactive delivery of their services compared to reactive IT services. I think the key to this definition that we will be trying to move away from, or at least talking about more, is the term asset or object. Traditional MSPs are focused on the IT asset or object and making sure that it's working as it should. But there are challenges with that focus when it comes to the business side of things. As I mentioned, platform and infrastructure expertise is not an issue within a reputable MSP. But as you look at providers that can help you out, I believe it's not out of the question to ask them how they think they can support and impact your business. Will their responses all focus on the asset or the object that they're trying to support? More than likely in the traditional case that is. And as a very simple example, so much of computer operations, which is part of the MSP's job, is following scripts and just making sure those issues are taken care of. It's very tactical. You take care of the issue, you follow the rule, you follow the process. Those things are necessary, but it's all very tactical. Can we move from that model a little bit and maybe think a little bit more strategically?
Yeah, Larry, I think we've all been on those calls where where it's very obvious that someone is following a script, and it's that business basis is that at least from my perspective, from the operations side, that you're looking for. It's like you feel like you're talking to a person on a script, and pardon my expression, but the techie who just understands bits and bytes and system performance, but that's not necessarily going to answer my questions from an operational standpoint.
Exactly. Again, normally we don't talk about application support when we're talking about MSPs, but I want to touch on that for a minute. Even though traditional MSPs never touch anything to do with supportive applications, our discussion here today will be talking about bringing some of these concepts together into the MSP model. So I think it's a good idea to review, at least at a high level, what application support is. For me, application support is the service of a business application providing functionality, education, implementation, and sustaining engineering expertise for those applications. And I guess first I'll point out that application support can come from a number of places. Certainly the vendor can provide some support. Your internal teams do quite a bit of the work too. And now there's an ever-increasing presence of third-party companies that offer application support as well. And in some instances, we work with companies that get their application support from all three of those sources. The important concept to note, though, in this list is about application support is the service of the business applications, and there's almost always implementation experience in the mix, and that implementation experience implies good knowledge of your business, and that's the part of application support I think we'll be focusing on today. That along with some technical support aspects too.
Right.
But just with as with an MSP, the application support provider is great within their scope. A reputable provider will know your business applications. They will know your business too. But in their case, they may not have the knowledge or expertise to be able to understand how technology plays a role in making those applications efficient or meet your business needs. Remember that complicated picture we were just looking at just a few minutes ago. There's a significant amount of technology required to make that business process happen and make those applications run successfully. So they all have to work together and work as a team.
Yeah, Larry, you know me. This is the area that I feel most comfortable with. But even I have to realize that especially in this ever increasingly technological focus that we have, that that side is critical too to the operations side.
Yeah, and now that we started to mention those two things, right? So we have the MSPs in one area, we have application support in another area. In the traditional environment, in most companies, those things are working individually, and I can't even count the number of discussions I've had over time about breaking down silos and how important that is. But the way that we handle both software and then infrastructure support, helps to naturally form those silos. No matter how good your intentions are, just the way that these things work today, is forming those things. But if we break down, these silos a little bit, I'm sorry, when we're talking about IMSPs, breaking down these silos isn't necessarily the goal, although it helps. But if you look at the picture that we have up on the screen right now, it's those things that lie in between the silos. It's like those gray areas that we have to worry about. So it's the things that don't necessarily fall into application support or the MSP silo. It's the stuff in the middle. But if we have those silos, there's no way to find that middle ground. And that's what we're really trying to worry about. And if we can take care of those things that are in those gray areas, that can really impact the business, positively. If you don't take care of those areas in the middle, you can have some negative impact as well. So really, it's about how do we focus on those gray areas. We believe an IMSP can take care of those kinds of things. It's a service provider that can supply those different kinds of services. They have the application skills. They have some of the required managed services skills. The skill sets that bridge those gaps are part of that solution. Looking at this in the form of a Venn diagram, the area that we're talking about is that dark shaded area in the middle, where business applications and technology platform are depending on each other. One thing happening in one of those areas impacts the other. So one of the things that we want to make sure that we highlight is as long as that dark shaded area is covered, you're really implementing the IMSP model that we're talking about. So you may have an application support provider with really strong technology skills, and that allows you to take care of that area of concern. Or you may have an MSP with solid business skills and application skills, and once again you have that area of concern covered. A complete IMSP, that we'll mention every once in a while would be able to cover everything in both areas. So they can cover all the application support issues and all the technology platform issues. But again, what we're trying to convey here is really if you can have one of those full circles covered, you're really implementing the IMSP model, even if it's at a limited scope. But in most cases, these two circles are quite separate from each other, and there's no overlapping area in how they're implemented, and that situation causes some problems in the business. And we'll go over some examples later on how that plays out.
Yeah, and maybe we'll get into this later as well, but looking at this, I just want to emphasize that the IMSP is not necessarily just one individual or one organization. It's the focus that we're looking at here, the focus that you need to take care of not only what is traditionally on either side of the circles, but also what is in that darkened area in the middle.
Yep, exactly. And although I said a minute ago that the IMSP could have a foundation in both either the application support provider or the foundation can be in the MSP as well, and their focus could be on the they can bring in some of the application skills. So the foundation can be in either one, both on the application side or the MSP, and you have one of those circles covered. But just for the benefit of this presentation, to let you know, we're going to focus on the model where the MSP can have additional business skills to be able to accomplish the IMSP model. And that's how we'll be working through the rest of this presentation. Now, we'll be doing that by covering three areas, actually. We'll be talking about expertise first, and then we'll be jumping into a little bit about the services too, because you can actually have the expertise there in place, but you also have to make sure those services can take care of that expertise or take advantage of that expertise to accomplish the goals. And then finally, we'll be wrapping up with taking a look at business impact and really how that affects the business in a couple of examples along the way. So we'll be looking at expertise, then services and how we structure those, and some business impact issues. But we'll start with expertise. So, we all have this experience, right? We're tortured by the technical support line. Why is that so frustrating? Well, you're really confident when you're actually going to get to talk to somebody who really knows how to handle your request, or you're going to get bounced around for a while. This actually happened to me yesterday. I was working with a software vendor and trying to get through to a support line, and actually had to make through the call cycle 3 times before I got to somebody. So we've all experienced that, right? You want to make sure that the person that we're trying to get in touch with really understands what we're trying to accomplish in our life, not necessarily what the technical issue is.
Yeah, I'm afraid we've all been there. You're right.
So from an expertise perspective, again, starting out with a foundation, I'm certain that anyone looking for an MSP will certainly make sure the firm is capable of handling their hardware, provides the proper hosting services they needed. It's pretty easy to validate their infrastructure and how they manage operations. I'm sure they'll have the skills to manage performance and uptime for all their assets. I'm sure they'll be able to put together good disaster recovery plans in place. So like we mentioned before, the foundation is that the MSP can handle the infrastructure pieces without fail, and they have great capabilities to do that. But again, the primary word that we always hear in talking about, or at least is implied in those statements, is assets or objects, and that's the thing that we want to try to move away from. When we're looking at an MSP, or if you're looking at an MSP, is anyone asking them about knowledge in your business space? Do they have experience with the effective technology on integrated applications? If you're specific with them about some of the ways your applications work, will they look at you with blank stares, or revert back to the assets that they need to manage? In most cases, the answer to that is yes. You definitely want them to have tracking systems and be able to enter tickets and those kinds of things. But does the processes they have in place exacerbate the silos? For example, in the simple example again from the tickets thing, so you go to different queues, and those queues report out to different people, and those are silo-based as well. Do their processes allow those teams to work together? And again, does the expertise actually exist in those teams to be able to do some of the things we need them to do?
Yeah, well, the ticket was resolved, but the business problem remains, right?
Yeah, exactly. And what can happen if you have a team that can handle all the technology issues that arise, but at the same time, have or build knowledge of the applications that the infrastructure supports. Does the MSP have the expertise, if they don't have the knowledge, to be able to build that knowledge, about the applications they're running? And some people might be asking, is it really possible to combine these sets of expertise? The answer is yes. We've done it at PSGI, so we know that it's certainly possible. But maybe it's best to look at a couple real-world examples and where some of these teams may or may not have made a difference, or if they existed, they would have made a difference. Dave, you want to walk us through maybe one or two?
Yeah, sure, Larry. Well, I guess the first in the area of expertise, I have a clear example that occurred recently at a chemical company. It was one Saturday morning, an end user was reported that none of the shipping documents were printing. And we all know what happens, when shipping documents don't print, product doesn't ship. Well, the users, they checked everything they could on the application side, and to them, everything appeared perfectly normal. There were no application errors to be seen by the application support team, but that was because they were in their silo. The problem was actually on the MSP side of the fence, not to pick on the MSP side, not to pick on them, but a backup had failed the previous night. And the MSP had seen that there was a problem. They saw the errors that were related to the backup issue. They got those errors, from their system. They handled the errors, and they went about their business completing the backup in what appeared to be, perfectly, accomplished. But what the MSP never considered was that the business applications might have been impacted, and that wasn't even a thought. But because the backup had halted another process in addition to the backup process, the shipping documents also failed to start. So the MSP had the expertise to know that the application may be impacted when the backup process failed. If they had that knowledge, the problem could have been resolved. Probably it could have been resolved in just a few minutes, but instead the shipping was delayed for a full 6 hours. No product out the door for 6 hours. So our point is that an integrated MSP would have known that relationship between the stalled backup process and the application document process.
Yeah, I'm just going to add just a little bit to this. I'm also familiar with this particular situation, and the worst part about it is that the user never reported the issue for that 6 hours. So really the problem just kind of sat there. Nobody was working on it, and once it was reported, the business team got involved and actually did resolve it pretty quickly. But imagine if there was that coordinated effort, that team that had the business knowledge and the technical knowledge to be able to start with the problem in the first place. The user never would have reported anything. The user thought something would happen, something is going to get better, and it just didn't until they finally called. So,
and the MSP is looking at it, well, I didn't do anything now because what he had done finished 6 hours ago.
There were no errors out there.
No errors out there.
Yeah.
Yep. So, I have another example that in this case also has to do with shipping. So in this case, the customer order information wasn't being delivered to the warehouse. So as we all know, no shipments were going out. But what actually preceded this application problem was that the MSP needed to perform maintenance on a server. And believing that, well, the server's only going to be down for a couple minutes, no one would even know, the MSP performed the maintenance and went and rebooted the server. But what he didn't realize was that the server was part of an MQ communications platform. Now, you don't need to necessarily know what that means. All you need to know is that that server was connected to another server. And when he rebooted the server like that, he broke the link during the maintenance process. So this MSP didn't understand the business environment and the fact that the two servers were interconnected, and by disconnecting them, he was creating problems with the business processes. The result, the MQ message numbers got out of sync, shutting down communications between the servers. The users reported the problem, but since the server was already back up and running, the MSP never realized the problem he caused. It took hours before the right team with the necessary expertise looked at the interdependencies between the application and the technology. Well, they finally diagnosed the problem and they realized the servers were out of sync. It took hours to troubleshoot because the MSP and the application support personnel, they were in entirely different silos. An IMSP, Integrated Managed Services Provider, would have understood these interrelationships, and they would have performed the maintenance in a way that either didn't stop the communications, didn't cause the error, or at least they would have understood how to resolve the problem more quickly.
Dave, thanks for walking us through those. So I want to mention a couple things. So you can see the mix of expertise in a single team can have a significant impact to the business. But just to recap, the kind of expertise we're talking about is about filling those gaps that we had before. So in the examples you just heard, in the first example, the knowledge that was needed was really how shipping documents move from one place to another, and to be able to understand the technical implementation of that in the application, not necessarily from the technology perspective, but in the application. And in the second one, it's technical skills on how applications are sending messages back and forth to each other. So it's not necessarily real detailed application knowledge, how to process an order or things like that. It's having the skill sets to understand the business function that's going on and the impact of those things that are working. And in the second example, you had an IMSP model been deployed where there was some business knowledge involved with setting up some of the maintenance plans. That could have been avoided in advance. So the maintenance plans would consider some of the things that are going on as opposed to just that asset. So that's the kind of things that we're talking about is, things that could be done a little bit future planning, could be involved in the planning of those maintenance plans and kind of take care of those in advance. In all cases, though, the focus is on the business and not the application. Not the asset. It's really focus on the business and what the business needs to accomplish. And that's the subtle thing that we really need to talk about. In the second example you're talking about, the focus was completely on the asset. The asset at the time actually wasn't being used that much, but there was low volume and it was a good time to do the maintenance piece on it, but it still caused some trouble at the business level. So you got to make sure that everything's in sync.
Yeah, it might have happened in the wee hours of the morning when the business wasn't even operational at the time, but it still caused the impact.
Right. So we just talked about expertise, and again, it's subtle. It's not infrastructure expertise. It is business and application expertise, but truly kind of technical side of things on there to fill in that area. So let's assume that you have the expertise that you need on your team to be able to cover that gap. But now you got to make sure that the services are in place that can take advantage of that expertise. So there's two things going on in the mix to try to make sure that everything works okay. So let's go through the services piece and how that might work in the IMSP model. This is just a quick little cartoon that kind of shows you that focus a little bit, right? The services might be similar between traditional MSP and IMSP, but like I said, the goal and the focus is different. The focus cannot be on the asset. So in this example, if your computer is no longer supported, well, does that mean you don't have to do your job anymore? Yeah, probably. I doubt it. You probably still have to do the work that you need to do. So you got to find ways to be able to not be so asset oriented and make sure that you're business oriented.
Yeah, like how many times have you heard the system's working on our side?
Yeah, exactly. We don't want that. We want to make sure that we all work together to solve the problem. So like in the expertise section, though, when we're talking to about a prospective buyer of MSP services, I'm sure we'd be looking for the basics, and the basics should always be there. The buyer would want to make sure the platforms they run on will be fully supported, that the team has strong technology skills in the platform and on the network that it runs on. They'd be able to make sure the systems operated efficiently and there was a good disaster recovery plan in place. You want to make sure that these processes and services, that all your assets are certainly cared for. We'll use the asset term in that case. Because that's the foundation that we need to work with. Any reputable MSP would be able to care for your assets, but again, can more be done to help your business? And that's what we're trying to accomplish. Again, that little darker shaded area in the Venn diagram that we're talking about.
Precisely.
So maybe we want to ask a few more or different questions, or with a different spin. When you're trying to buy some of these services. Sure, they have services that might be able to improve system performance, but are they able to provide services that can improve your application's performance? There is a difference there, right? There's ways to make those applications run faster that have a focus on the technical structure of those applications as opposed to the infrastructure. And do they know enough about your business to know how the infrastructure you have in place can help you. Or, again, back to that complicated picture we were looking at before, does the infrastructure enable any bottlenecks that we're worried about? So if they really understand how important certain things need to get to certain places, it's possible to be able to help prevent those bottlenecks that we're talking about. And even at the most basic level, do the people on the team, the MSP team, have the ability to communicate and collaborate with individuals in the business who have no technical skills at all, and to be able to provide guidance on how the MSP team can help reach business goals? It's providing services that indeed ensure a healthy infrastructure, but the goal is to reach those business goals. If an MSP provider understands this, their recommendations may be swayed by the business need and not the asset standard, just like we talked about in one of your examples. In some cases, the most technologically savvy solution may not necessarily be the best solution to allow customers to reach their goals as fast as possible. So again, our issue is, it's not asset object based, it's business based, and how do we deal with that? Or in some cases, the service might need to be tweaked a bit and just start from a different viewpoint. And maybe again, in this case, it'd be good to go through a couple examples, and Dave, I'll let you take us through those.
Sure. Well, I guess the first one actually occurred when we were acting on the application support side, and another organization, in fact, was providing the MSP services for this particular customer. But what happened here, we were working with a Japanese division of an adhesive company, and the users arrived for work Monday morning, but their screens were not in their native language, Japanese. And the MSP had upgraded the operating system over the weekend. And even though they thought that they had installed the local languages during the upgrade had failed the first time around. So what did they do? They went around and they tried a second attempt at the upgrade, and that appeared to work perfectly fine. So the MSP thought to themselves, success, we're done. Well, what actually happened was that they had, in the first attempt, they had tried to perform the upgrade with the incorrect double byte software, the double byte for the Japanese language, and that first attempt caused configuration issues, and then the ensuing language problem. What the MSP didn't understand was that the impact of the original installation had on the language configuration. And when they went ahead and, they just went ahead and reinstalled the upgrade. Well, it turned out the second attempt to them had no issues at all, and the system was made available to the users. Everything's done. Well, an integrated MSP may not have used the incorrect double byte software during the upgrade service. But even if they did, they would have understood the consequences of the unsuccessful first attempt, and the result of that on the second upgrade. So the difference here really is thinking from the user's perspective point of view, of these events, and trying to determine when a failure occurs, what the consequences might be for the user.
And I'm going to add just one more comment to this one too, if you don't mind. Because we were involved in this from part of it on the application support side of things, the end result of this. So when the user discovered the issue, calls were made, obviously, and things were escalated. And quickly we formed a team together. That team had both technology, infrastructure, and application skills on it. So it was a simulated IMSP, really.
Right.
Right there. And the issues were discovered, found, and resolved quite quickly, with that group. I think it's just sort of after the fact proof that if we could bring these kind of skills together in the first place, if an MSP is really looking at that we can prevent issues, from happening. And that was a great example of how we did that at the end.
Very cool. So another example having to do with these services being performed was at a food manufacturer. And in this case, the sales data being viewed by the end users didn't appear to be accurately displayed. And by the second day, the users of the BI tool, they said that the data was different than they'd seen in previous reports or dashboards. So they looked at the data warehouse itself, and everything appeared perfectly normal. Well, turns out again, the MSP implemented a new security model over a source of the data that the data warehouse used, one of the many. And as far as the MSP was concerned, the security model applied had brought the server up to industry standards, the security aspects totally successfully, so their job was done. Well, what the MSP didn't understand was the consequences of the new security model and how it related to the BI query, as he was in his silo. So it took a while to identify the issue because the gathering of data for the data warehouse, it only happened, once a day or twice a day, but it wasn't a constant occurrence. So it's not like any error messages appeared, while the MSP was working. So looking at this from an integrated managed services perspective, a review of that BI access to the source, to this particular source data, would have been performed before the new security model was applied, and that would have been taken into account.
So again, this is just another example of not necessarily detailed application knowledge, but business knowledge in this case, right? So understanding how the business uses some of these items and some of these servers and some of this data, as opposed to real application knowledge. So in this case, it's really just simply knowledge of the business, because there was no real application knowledge that needed. In this case, it was just being able to plan properly with what was going on and having the right people in place. So, if the MSP has the ability to, again, going back to that picture we were looking at, ability to understand how all this connects to the business goals, they'll ask different questions when jobs are starting to happen, and that's what we hope to accomplish through the IMSP model.
Great.
And again, thanks for those examples. I hope our point is getting across that it's really the proper focus can make all the difference in the world. Now, in order to have that proper focus, you certainly have to have the right expertise in place. Again, it's not this wide breadth of application knowledge. It's that gray area that we need to bring on into the table. And that's what we're looking for. We want to have expertise available, services that take advantage of that expertise, and a tweak in the focus to make sure it's all business oriented and business goal oriented. And if we get all that, then we hope to have a pretty positive impact on the business. Again, focus, right? We focus on the customer and not the asset. If we stay focused on that goal, everything else will line up as it should, right? So we don't ever want to lose, the focus on the customer and making sure that that's our goal. And maybe, I guess, if we simplify it all, if your customers receive the products that you produce in the time and quality they expect, that's what we're looking for. Now, again, I referred to it before. Think back to that diagram outlining the supply chain. The process in which you deliver your products to customers is complex. You want to make sure that you're working with a firm that can, make you more efficient at accomplishing those tasks, and also be able to look into the future and anticipate problems that you might have later on. If you're working with an IMSP that has the expertise and services lined up with the business, that with the business as the focus as opposed to the assets, then you'll most certainly prevent problems from occurring. And if they do occur, you'll reduce the time in finding those solutions. And when it works right, it's really a great experience for the business. And maybe it's a good idea to just kind of walk through one of those examples that really worked well. So we were recently involved with a very large project where a global company was moving all of their infrastructure to a new data center, and at the same time replacing their Power I systems. The team did have all the expertise and service focus of an IMSP. The team worked together to understand how the business needed to operate. All of the validation processes for this process, to make sure things were working right, were all developed from the business process perspective. And just as a quick example, just because the business processes were used as a driving factor in the validation plans, at least 3 critical integrations were uncovered as being unplanned for originally in terms of infrastructure testing. So, if we think about that complexity again, there's layers, right? There's the layers of the applications and business functions, and there's the layer of the technology underneath it that needs to run properly, and there's that stuff in the middle where they work together. And by focusing on all the validation plans for the upper layer, really identified how those things underneath work together. And if we had just focused on simply infrastructure and those assets, they probably all worked right, but some things would have been missed in that, testing plan.
Yeah, those three integration points would definitely have caused issues with the business later on.
Right, and don't get me wrong, we certainly needed some really strong technology expertise to make sure all the servers and platforms and networks and were all operational and the systems and to make sure that happened. And the application knowledge was available to research the effect on the business function. So those two things together really made this a success. Even within the IT team, so not the business side of things, the IT team had some business knowledge available, and the first pass of validation with, again, complete focus on the business outcomes, did the first pass of validations and then and took care of any issues that were there, if there were any. Then on top of that, the business was brought in to do final validation. So within the IT team, we had both going on, and we could hand something to the business before they went live and actually did some of their validation work that was really well tested. And because of that, from the business perspective, on that go live weekend, they needed to invest very little time. We made through that process pretty easy. I'm not going to be wrong. There's a great amount of work that went into this, months in advance to be able to do the planning for this. It was a large undertaking, but it did culminate on a migration weekend. The systems were all brought up 16 hours ahead of schedule, and not a single issue, not one, has been reported in the months since that migration. So this is definitely a shining example of how the expertise and service focus of an IMSP can be brought to bear and have a positive impact on the business. It really was done right in this project, and the focus was kept right where it needed to be. And in retrospect, if you look at it, because of some of the things that we found during that validation process, it really made the technology piece more stable because we did the right things there. So, it just was a great example of how this can all work together.
Excellent, excellent.
So let's just recap some concepts we've been going over and kind of go over a summary real quick. So we'll start again just with the IMSP team. It can be done in a couple different ways. One is a company like PSGI, and we can bring all the expertise needed to the table. So we consider ourselves a complete IMSP where we can support the entire application and the entire infrastructure. So we can eliminate all of those silos and bring the right expertise to focus to bear across all of our services. So we can kind of eliminate all those gray areas with the people we can put up together on a mixed team. Now, to be fair, we certainly would love people to just buy our services, but to be fair, the concept we're talking about can be done through a combination of companies or groups of people in an organization as well. And, but if a solution like this is implemented through, those means there needs to be some really good communication skills, and on top of that, contractual arrangements that make it easy for teams to work together. So if you have outside resources working together, you got to make sure that those work as one. We've also been part of those teams in the past, and we've seen them work quite well. And in other cases, they weren't quite as good, but it is possible to make that happen. It all comes back to, we were talking about the focus of the team and what their goals are. Again, from a summary perspective, is the focus on the team that you're working with asset-based or is it business-based? Traditional MSP is based on the technical services that it can provide to support assets, while the IMSP is defined by the ability to provide business application domain expertise where needed throughout its service portfolio. So the concept there is the expertise available to be able to cover that area? That's the question then to figure out. Can we cover that area with the expertise that's available? I know I've said it over and over and over again, but it's all about a difference in focus.
Exactly.
Now, at the beginning of this presentation, I talked about the fact that I hope this webinar would allow you to ask, different questions and look at things in a slightly different light, than you had before if you're looking at an MSP. So let's talk through what I was talking about there for a minute. Just look at some questions in each of these areas. So first of all, on the expertise side, well, do you require mainly platform expertise? That's the question we always ask ourselves, right? Do they have platform expertise? Well, maybe we should ask that a little bit differently. Are you seeking a provider that can relate to the end user experience? So they had to have the technology expertise, but do they really understand what you do and how application configurations can be really complex, and how those you have to use the technology that's out there. So, what kind of expertise do you have in those fronts? On the services side, we always ask, do they have services to help maintain, operate platforms efficiently, interrupt time, that kind of thing. Certainly, a reputable MSP like we talked about will have those services. But, maybe we need to ask a few more questions. Do you require a service from your MSP that ensures your business is efficient and has no delays in delivering to your customers? That's a very different focus than those assets. And that's an MSP that's going to ask you more questions. It's going to look at how things are structured. It's going to look at how you use the assets that they happen to work on and make recommendations from there. And then finally, on the business impact side, sure, we know that the MSP will know your platform and network usage and latency and those kinds of things. Those certainly impact your business. You got to make sure that those things are there. But, does your MSP have the capability to prevent siloed areas of expertise and services? And do they have even the expertise in one of those silos that you might be able to tap into? And a way to look at this is, as you go through strategic meetings about future business and activity that your business is doing, do you consider anyone in your MSP, a must-have invite to one of these meetings, at least somewhere early in the cycle? And that might give you some insight into whether or not they can play a role in your strategic needs or not. If you have an IMSP, I contend that you would want them involved in that process, because they might be able to help make it easier. Everything is so technology-based today, no matter what we're trying to accomplish, that we have to tie together the business and the technology. And if we don't, we're not going to be successful, moving into the future. So you want somebody to work with who understands both in time together, because everything is tied to technology today, and we can't just focus on the assets.
Totally agree, Larry.
Okay, that's it for our presentation today. I do see that we have a couple of questions out there.
Yes, we do. Yes, we do.
If you have any other questions, please add them now. If you don't mind, we'll start working down these questions now, and then we'll wrap up.
All right, well, the first question comes from Tracy, and she said, she looked at the presentation and she says, adding all this capability to your MSP, she's concerned that it would drive up the cost of an engagement.
Okay. So, well, first of all, if the organization you're working with is a complete IMSP, like we mentioned before, like what we do, we already have the application skills, business skills, technology skills in place on the team. So we're working from a model that has expertise available. We don't have to go out and get it. And part of our model can take advantage of that expertise in a lot of different fronts. So the cost of us providing these services, for example, in a complete IMSP environment is not any higher than anybody else. So it's, we have the skill sets that are available. Now, if you're working with a team that has to bring in some of those skill sets on top of what they already have today, certainly in practice that would increase their costs in order to deliver those services. I contend it wouldn't increase them that much, and if they did, certainly the business impact benefits should certainly outweigh any of the costs that are associated with that. I think it's important, if you're looking at an MSP, and perhaps if their costs are slightly higher than you might expect, is to really understand what that brings to you and how you can use those things. But I really don't think it would increase the cost that much.
Okay.
And in some cases, not at all.
All right. Second question comes from Ed, and he asks, how can any organization have the necessary business knowledge for all of the different types of companies that they support?
No, we get this question a lot. Actually, every single customer, I think every single prospect that we've worked with in the past has asked this question. So I'm not surprised it came up. It's the, and I hope this doesn't sound, condescending in any way, but most businesses think they're very unique. And if we work with one chemical company, for example, they'll think they're very unique or different than everybody else. And we'll go to the next one, and they'll think they're different and unique and different than everybody else. And but as you start working with all these companies, you'll find that the things that they need the most are quite common across the board. There's always some little differences here and there, but the things that they need the most are really quite common across the board. And so certainly from a verticals perspective, it's quite easy to figure out what you might need to know from a business perspective. So, and we have two things that we need to worry about from a expertise kind of area that we talked about in our presentation. One is business knowledge and understanding what the business needs to do. So from a verticals perspective, I think you can pick those things up pretty quickly. And it's not all that different. So if you have hundreds of customers, that vertical list is quite a bit smaller than that, right? And you can come up with those without too much trouble. And even within those verticals, many of the verticals compared to one to another, for example, process manufacturing, are all very similar too. So you can really narrow that down quite a bit and understand what people need to accomplish. Now, on top of that, you also have to have some technical skills from the application perspective and how it uses pieces. And I think from there, it's trying to understand what you really need to do. And if you're good at being an IMSP, you don't need to be walking users through entering orders like I mentioned before. The kinds of examples you gave are really tying that technology to the application. So it's do you have the right ability to ask the right questions about what business functions are running on which platforms? Can you get to know what kinds of integrations are running? What kind of technology are used by those integrations? Can you ask the right questions about the importance of whether something breaks in certain points or not? And you know where those integration points are. Do you understand or have the ability to ask the right questions on how the application delivers information to a customer, and from those questions you'll be able to come up with very similar answers across the board. So it's really understanding how the application and technologies work together, and then learning to focus on those areas that are most vulnerable, like connections to outside sources or integrations using older technology. Ask questions about plans for the future that are not slanted toward assets, and you'll be surprised of how you can tie that to the knowledge that you already have. As you work through these exercises, you're going to find that the same issues, like most companies, like I mentioned before, but on that front, you do need to invest in people that can ask these questions and have the balance of business and technical skills to do that. But you'll find that an individual can cover a whole lot of ground across the board, and we found that in our experience too. So we're doing it in practice today. We feel very comfortable with that, and we feel very comfortable bringing on customers in most industries and being able to support them well.
Great. And we have another question from Dan, who wants to know, they already have an MSP that they have in-house, and I guess he feels that, he looked at that silo shot and felt that was sort of the way that their organization was currently running. Do we have any suggestions for how that they can move forward to get this IMSP environment in place?
Yeah, we might have to know a little bit more about the MSP that's working there today. But like I said before, some of this can happen virtually, where if they have good technology skills and good platform skills that are working there and you're happy with that, great. Then you got to make sure that you can bring those other skills together to work with that team. And then it's a little bit more complicated than having a single IMSP out there, but you can get a virtual reality of IMSP by bringing a couple organizations together. But, and this is the big but, is, can they both work as one team? Can they contractually work together, openly and take care of issues that need to be taken care of? And what I mean by that is, if, for example, you had to hire a second firm to come in and they work hourly based, is it hard for them to try to get work done because you have to get all these hours approved every single time? Or can you just get these people communicating regularly and develop processes that involve both of them to accomplish these tasks? It's not really all that hard to do as long as you have the foundation, from a contractual perspective together and making that happen. And for Dan's benefit, if he wants to give us a call and talk a whole lot more about it, we certainly can do that and just give him some ideas and advice, and really specifically to what he might be going through.
Yeah, thanks. I think what your point there was, communication is really key.
Well, again, it's back to our presentation, right? Is the expertise available, and where is it available? And are the services structured around that expertise? So in his case, more than likely, the services are not structured around that kind of expertise. It's asset-based. And you need to be able to bring those things together and get both people thinking in a slightly different mode. You can do that through good management and bringing that expertise together and working as a single team. It is a little bit more complicated than it's not in one organization, but certainly very doable. And we've done that in a couple of different places. And even, one of the examples that you talked about with the Japanese thing is an area that we've done that before in the past, and we're moving much more toward that model there now, where we're working together with a team there, a different MSP. We're bringing some of the business and technical skills under the covers, and it's working great. So we certainly have the experience to accomplish that, and we've got arrangements there in place that allow us to work as one team, and we're just sharing information back and forth, and there's we all know what roles we play. It's working quite well, and certainly we can help anybody kind of get through that process.
Okay. All right. Well, I guess last chance. Are there any more other questions out there? Shelley, Tom, anything out there? Any of the other attendees? All right. Well, we're going to wrap it up then. I want to again thank you very much for attending our webinar today. We do hope that you'll take the opportunity to take a look further at what an integrated managed services provider is all about, and feel free to contact our organization if we can be of any assistance.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for attending, and we'd be glad to help and answer any questions that you might have for follow-up. Thanks again.
Have a great day.